current liabilities, as rightly told by you people. There are two concepts of working capital. One is gross working capital and the other is net working capital. So gross working capital includes only current assets, whereas net working capital includes current assets and minus current liabilities. Both are equally important for us from business point of view. How much money should I invest in current assets is an important thing that I should be knowing. And net working capital tells us how much is the money or how much is the excess of current assets over current liabilities. And if your current assets are more than your current liabilities, you get a positive working capital. That is, if your current assets are 100 rupees and your current liabilities are 80 rupees, 100 minus 80, your working capital will be 20 rupees, which is positive. And if your current assets are lesser than your current liabilities, it is negative working capital. Now, can anybody tell me, can a company still earn profits by having negative working capital? I mean, is negative working capital good or bad, or can companies sustain with negative working capital? Anybody can put it in the chat box or even unmute and let me know. Is negative working capital good or bad? Bad, okay. Pakshal says bad, Sarvari bad, Sarvesh bad, okay. Padmanabh, yes ma'am, company can survive with negative working capital. Okay, few companies are there, ma'am. Example, Tata Motors. Okay, Sonam. Uh, Now what happens is, what answers you all have given are right in a way. You should not have negative working capital. Your assets should be more than liabilities to show financial stability and health of your short-term sources. But if there is negative working capital, that doesn't mean that the company is making losses, because it will not affect your profitability, as said by Pooja. And few companies are making huge profits even after having negative working capital. I'm not sure about Tata Motors, maybe it has, I have not checked, but there are few companies which actually have, like Hindustan Unilever has it, so that those companies are still running high and highest turnovers with negative working capital. So negative working capital is not bad, but having positive working capital is good, we can say in that way. When your working capital is negative, that means what you have to pay is more than what you have in your hand, that is whatever cash bank balance. Company should always try to manage its current assets better. When we calculate ratios on current assets, current liabilities, we call it as the liquidity ratios or liquidity position of the company. So when you have negative working capital, you say that the liquidity position of the company is not good. And few of your suppliers who supply you raw material and all, they basically look at your liquidity position and then they supply, because they are not bothered with your profit or anything, but they are bothered with how much current assets you have, will you be able to repay the money on time. So they are more worried about the liquidity. But big companies can still survive on their name, fame and goodwill, and in spite of having negative working capital, they'll have regular supply. So there is possibility of negative working capital and still the company can be successful. So both are possible and both can happen depending on the situation of the company. So let's go to the next part. Now, what is working capital management? Working capital management, it is nothing but a continuous process of making decisions relating to short-term financing. So management, the word itself says is we have to take decisions, we have to have strategies, and we have to plan and manage the things. So here in case of working capital management, what are we managing? We are managing short-term funds. How to handle current assets and liabilities. When you manage those, you call it as working capital management. Management of working capital refers to current asset as well as liabilities. Now, when I say of current assets and liabilities, the major thing that we have to remember is how much current asset should I have? Can I have huge amount of current asset, or I should have very little current asset? That has to be decided by the company. So basically there are two extreme ends, or they call it as two policies of having working capital. One is the flexible policy. In case of flexible policy, you have lot of money and your working capital amount is huge. Your current assets are huge. You have lots of cash, bank balance, short-term investments. So you're flexible to decide anything. Like any new order comes, you can immediately take that order. Anyone is ready to supply raw materials at low price, you will immediately buy them because you have money, you have current assets, and your current assets are huge. So you're flexible enough to take any kind of decision. But in case of restrictive policy, you have very little working capital. You don't keep huge cash, you don't have huge bank balances, you only manage with little amount of assets, and then you become very restrictive, or you can say aggressive. Restrictive in the sense you are not able to take any decisions immediately. You cannot buy as much raw materials as you want when the prices are low because you have limited cash and bank balance. So you have it in limit. Now how a person who is very restrictive can be aggressive? Aggressive basically means being a risk taker. So if I have very less amount and still I'm running the business, that means I'm taking risk. If I have huge amount and I'm running the business, I don't have any risk. I have money to pay for everything. So a person with flexible policy has low risk. So we call him as conservative. He doesn't want to take risk. I want money. Okay, let's explain this with an example. Okay, suppose your father gives you 5,000 rupees pocket money every month. So you have 5,000 with you, and then you plan for parties and all with your friends. You move out and you go out to have dinner, lunch. So it basically means you have money and you are very conservative. That means you don't want to take risk. You always want lots of money in your pocket. Only then you make plans of going out and doing parties. So that is one kind of a person. The other, maybe your pocket money is hardly 1,000 rupees, and one of your friends says, let's go to a 5-star hotel and have food there. And you take risk and you go. You say, okay, fine, what big deal, let's go. You don't have money in your pocket, you know there's hardly 1,000 rupees, and we're going to a 5-star, it may cost us more. But you still join your friends and you go there. So that is taking risk. With little resources, you're trying to manage. So you're very aggressive. Okay, so I hope the example was clear. Now let's go. Now see, I just want to ask one question. Being flexible, that is having lots of money, is good, or being restrictive, that is having very little money, that is low current asset, is good? You can answer in the chat box. More amount of current assets is good or less amount of current assets? Anybody? Restrictive is good, more amount is good, Pakshal says. Apurva, being flexible. Nikila says flexible. More current assets is what Pavitra has to say. Kula says more, Padmanabh says balanced, correct. Both is good. Okay, flexible is good, being flexible is better. Hema says flexible, Divya says flexible, Sarvesh flexible. Okay, now each one of you have different opinions towards it. Let us understand the advantages and disadvantages of it. If you are very flexible, you have lots of money, you will have to handle something called as carrying cost. What is carrying cost, anybody? Okay, I'll tell you. Cost required to carry the current assets. What kind of cost we will require to carry current assets? Now let's understand. If I keep lots of cash in my pocket, what I'm losing interest on that. So that is the cost that I'm incurring because I've kept cash in my pocket. If I have lots of stock, what will happen? For that stock, I have to spend on maintenance. I have to have a warehouse. I have to keep a person in charge, security person for that warehouse. If it is a perishable good, I have to sell it before it gets perished. I have to add some chemicals and keep it so that the shelf life of that particular product increases. All this will cost more. So you're going to pay more. That is, you're going to have a huge amount of carrying cost when you carry lots of current assets. So if you're flexible, that means your current assets are more, you're carrying them with you, and therefore your carrying cost is high. Now what happens in case of restrictive? Here the carrying cost reduces because your current assets are limited in nature. But the problem is, just a second. So when you are having less amount of current assets, your carrying cost reduces, but your shortage cost increases. Now, what is shortage cost? When I have less money, when I have less goods, that is stock, when I have less amount of debtors, I basically have shortage of resources. So, if I get a big order immediately, I won't be able to process it because I have limited resources. So, that is called as shortage cost. In that case, as low as your current assets, more is the shortage cost. So, having too much of current asset will lead to high carrying cost, and having too little current asset will lead to high shortage cost. So both are bad. You cannot go to the extreme ends. I can't have too much of money, nor I can have very little money. So I have to take a midway. So I need to have a balance between the two. We'll understand that now in the further slides. I have explained the flexible policy and restrictive policy to both of you, both the policies to you all, and we have also discussed the merits and demerits. If I have more money, carrying cost will increase. If I have less money, shortage cost will increase. So we have discussed that. Now, what is carrying cost? What is shortage cost? We call it as a optimum level of current assets. You cannot have too high, you cannot have too low, so you need to have an optimum level of current asset. To have an optimum level of current asset, you should have a balance between carrying cost and shortage cost. We call it as trade off. If you could see here the word trade off, you should have a trade off between current asset and current liabilities. I'll just highlight this word for you. So trade-off is nothing but a balance between the current assets and current liabilities. So carrying costs are mainly in nature of the cost for financing higher level of current assets. When you have high amount of current assets, you basically get carrying cost. Whereas shortage costs are mainly in the form of disruption of production schedule, loss of sale, loss of customer goodwill. When you have shortage, you will say, no, I cannot produce so much. Sorry, I cannot supply you. So this way you're losing your goodwill, you're losing your sales, and your production schedule is also interrupted, because if there is no raw material, you cannot continuously produce. So both are dangerous. We need to have a trade-off or a balance between the two. So how do we have that? Let's see. Okay. So I'm explaining it to you through a graph. So if you see on the y-axis, I have carrying cost and shortage cost. Both are the costs that we are putting on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, I have level of current asset. With level of current asset, I mean the amount of current asset. So if you have paper and pen with you, maybe you can just start drawing the graph along with me so that you understand what I'm trying to say. So level of current asset, let us assume that I have current asset of 1000 rupees, 2000, 3000, 4000, 5000. So these are the levels that I write on the x-axis: 0, 1000, 1, 2000, 3000, 4000 and 5000. Maybe those are the level of current assets. Now what will happen when I have more and more current assets? My carrying cost and shortage cost will get impacted. So let's understand one by one. So first we're talking about carrying cost. Now if you see here, I said that we'll have 0 on the x-axis. So when it is 0, your cost is also 0. You can see that red line here at the 0. Then when you move ahead and suppose you have 1000 rupees current asset, then your carrying cost also will increase. So from 0, just a second. From 0, if you see, if I go to 1000 rupees, my current asset has increased. The line is going upward. So my carrying cost is increasing. More the current asset, more is the carrying cost. When I go to 3000, 4000, 5000, the carrying cost went on increasing. So see on the x-axis, as you go ahead from 1000 to 5000, your carrying cost goes on increasing. Okay, let's understand the next part. That is the shortage cost. Now what will happen? If the carrying cost is high, I'm directly going to the high level, that is here where I've written level of current asset. If the carrying cost is high, your shortage cost is very little, because more carrying cost means you don't have shortage, not at all, because lots of money. I have 5000 in my pocket, I can go to the 5-star hotel. So I don't have any shortage. So my shortage cost is very little. But from 5, if I come to 4, the shortage cost increases because money is less. From 4, if I come to 3, 2, 1, so if you see, as I come to 1, my shortage cost is the highest. So if I have less amount of current assets, shortage cost will be more, carrying cost will be less. If I have more amount of current assets, carrying cost will be more, shortage cost will be less. So I cannot have extreme ends, nor I can have 0, nor I can have 100%. I have to take a midway or a trade-off. So we have to see where these two intersect. At which place these two are intersecting, that will be the optimum level of current assets for you. So if they are intersecting maybe at 2000, then 2000 is the optimum level of current asset at which your cost is minimum. So this curve that you're getting now after they intersect, this is also called as the total cost curve. So total cost is minimum at this point. I'll show you that curve also. Just see this curve. only we have drawn one more with a purple line, and we call it as a total cost curve, and it is minimum at this point where both intersect, and you get the optimum level of current asset. So this is how you have to determine the optimum level of current asset. We will have maybe one or two practice sums on this. I think we had it earlier also. I don't remember, but I'll just check it. So it is optimum level of current asset is that level of current asset where your carrying cost and shortage cost both are equal, where they intersect. So carrying cost also should be 500, shortage cost also should be 500. When both are equal, I come to the optimum level of current assets. You need to remember this concept because we're going to use the same concept again when we go to the second unit, that is cash management. Here we are discussing from working capital point of view, there we'll discuss from cash point of view. Any doubts in this, you can put it on the chat box, any questions that you have, or you can unmute and ask. Anybody, any questions? No doubts, okay. Anybody else? Okay. So let's go ahead. I hope you have understood till here. So I have planned for some Q&A, which actually I've asked already during the class also, but I'll ask few people now specifically to answer these. So y'all will have to answer me these questions. Not all, I'll ask only a few of you to answer. Either you type it on the chat box or you unmute and let me know the answer. So first I want to ask it to Deepali. The first question, working capital is dash. Either you tell me the formula or you tell me the definition. Yes, Deepali, are you active and online? Okay, Deepali, yes. Tell me the answer. Working capital is dash. Yes, working capital is equal to current asset minus current liabilities, or it is basically short-term funds. So correct answer, Deepali. Let's go to the next question. I want Gurunath to answer it. Flexible policy is dash. Gurunath, are you there? Yes, Gurunath. A flexible policy is dash. You can answer it in a one word also, or you can even, if you want, you can unmute also. No problem. Everybody has to be active in the session. All the sessions will go like this now. I'll be asking questions. I'll be having quizzes in between. And if you just on mute your mic and video and go off, it is not acceptable. So you have to be active. Yes, Gurunath, what is flexible policy? Okay, he doesn't remember. Anybody would like to help him out? He's a no risk taker. It's a conservative policy. Yes, it's high in current assets. Pooja says, Shreya, low risk, correct. Where there are more current assets, correct. So all the answers are correct. So flexible policy is the one where you have more current assets and the risk taking capability is low and you can take any kind of decisions. Okay, all the other questions are also same, but it's okay. The next is, what is restrictive policy? So I want Mary to answer it. Mary, you're there online? Yes. He is a risk taker. Okay. So that means how much, whether the current assets will be more or less, Mary? Yes, it will have less current assets. Correct. So let's go to the next question. What is carrying cost? And I want Mitali to answer it. What is carrying cost? Yes, Mitali. Are you there online? Okay. Mumtaz, can you answer it? Okay, Mitali has answered it. Financing a high level of current assets. Correct. So carrying cost is the cost that you need to carry current assets. That is when you have high level of current assets, what you spend on carrying them. So that's correct answer. The next is what is, it's not storage actually, it should be shortage cost. So what is shortage cost? Mumtaz, you can answer it. What is shortage cost? Neha, can you answer it? Mumtaz, cost which are incurred. Incurred for what, Mumtaz? Loss of production cost. Okay. When business runs out of stock. Okay, correct. So both the answers are correct. So this was up till optimum level of current assets. I hope all of you have understood and there were no doubts. So let's move ahead to the next part. The next part talks about sources of financing working capital. Now there are various sources of financing working capital. Accruals is the first source, then you have trade credits, working capital advance, and so on. So there's a big list. We will understand it one by one so that it is clear. Accruals are nothing but expenses incurred but not paid. Now you remember in accounts I used to teach you accrued expenses, which is nothing but something that you have incurred but not yet paid. You're going to pay later. We also called it as outstanding expenses. When we did final accounts also we discussed this, right? Outstanding expenses, you add it in the balance sheet, you less it in the P&L. So these are called as accruals. Now, how can accruals be a source of finance? So, I mean, does accrual give you any money? No, it doesn't give you any money, but it is an indirect source of finance. How? Now, suppose I have got an electricity bill of 10,000 rupees for my factory, and I need 10,000 rupees to pay it to my supplier also. So, what I will do, I will delay payment of electricity bill and use that money in paying it to the supplier. So, what I am doing, I have incurred the expenses, but I have not paid. So I have accrued them. That means I have delayed them for further payment. So till I pay till the later date, till then that money can be used for some other purpose. So we call it as a source of finance. Expenses incurred but not paid. The major accrual items are wages and taxes. Usually people delay paying wages and taxes because wages will be a huge amount. If I have to pay wages to 100 workers on daily basis, and today I need money, I can tell them today's wages will be paid tomorrow or maybe after 8 days. By then I can use that money for some other purpose. So that is a source of money for my working capital short term need. Payment of taxes can be delayed and that money can be used. Since no interest rate is paid by the firm on its accrual, they are often regarded as free source of finance. Now, if I tell my worker, I'll pay you wages after 8 days, he will not ask me interest on wages. He will not say, no, you're paying late by 8 days, so pay me some interest. No, he's going to just take the wages amount. So it is basically free source. They're a good source of finance, but they are not under the control of management. Why they're saying this? Because you cannot keep delaying every time. There's a limit for delaying also. If you always delay, if it is paid later all the time, then the worker will start leaving your job. Because if I am working with some company and the company always pays me salary late, I would feel the company has no money, no funds, let me search somewhere else. If you always delay payment of taxes or electricity bill, someday they will charge you penalty. So it's good, but it is not in your control and you cannot do it most often. So this is one of the source of finance. For a very short period, if you need money, you can use it. Any doubts with this? Okay, let's continue with the next one. The second part is about trade credit. Now this is nothing but the uh, something that you get on credit, right? You go to canteen, you have your breakfast and you write in the book and come back. So what is that book? That is basically telling you that you're getting credit. You have to pay the money later. You can buy the goods now, but you can make the payments later. That is called as trade credit. Okay, so when you get buy goods on credit, we consider it as trade credit. So it refers to the credit that the customer gets from suppliers of goods in the normal course of business. In practice, the buying firm do not have to pay cash immediately for the purchase made. So you buy the goods today and you did not pay the cash immediately. You can pay it at a later date, but you should have a good relationship with that particular customer. Only then he will allow you credit. This delay of payment is short-term financing called trade credit. It contributes to about 1/3 of the short-term financing. So if I need 1 lakh rupees, suppose as for working capital, 1/3 of 1 lakh rupees comes from trade credit, because major working capital things are cash, debtors and stock. So stock, if I'm getting on credit and I can pay later, that means 1/3 of my financial needs is taken care there. Okay, so requirement for obtaining trade credit, as I told you, anybody will not give you that. Your earning record over a period of time should be good. If you're earning well, you're showing profit in your P&L account, only then the supplier will trust on you and give you on credit. Your liquidity position should be good. This is what I told you when I was explaining you negative working capital. If you show negative working capital, the liquidity position will be bad. Then it is doubtful to get credit, trade credit. So your liquidity should be good. Your record of payment. In the past, if you have taken credit, how fast you have made the payment, have you paid it on the due date or you have delayed, taken extensions, all that would be seen. And your relationship with the supplier. If you're a good friend to him, you have a cordial relation, then you will get it on credit very easily. So these are the points that you should keep in mind for getting a trade credit. Benefits of trade credit, it's easily available, there is flexibility, and basically it is bit informal, because you get on credit and you say, let's take the example of that canteen only. You go eat, you write it in the book and you come back. So that is very informal, right? You can say, I have not written it, this is not my handwriting, she cannot do anything, right? Do you sign a bond for that money? No. Does she have some legal action on you? No. So it's basically on the basis of trust. If you trust each other informally, you can get trade credit very easily and the business can go. Okay. So these are the benefits. Any doubts in case of trade credit? The session has to be of 45 minutes. So 45 minutes is done. I should actually give you a break now and again start at 1 o'clock. So should we break and you will join with the same link, you can rejoin at 1 o'clock again. Okay. So all of you exit from the meeting. I'll also end the meeting and we will join again with the same link at 1 o'clock. Okay, let's start with the further part. I hope others will keep joining. So the next part is we were discussing sources of financing working capital. So out of the sources available, we have discussed accruals, trade credits. The next that we have to discuss is working capital advance by commercial banks. So let's start with it. Now the name itself says it is nothing but a loan taken from the bank for short term purpose or for working capital purpose. Now, when we take the loan from the bank, bank finances are the main institutional sources of working capital finance in India. Bank considers firm sales and production plan and desirable level of current assets in determining the working capital requirement. So, you won't get the full amount of loan that you want. And before telling how much money you want, you need to prepare a production plan and a sales plan and submit it to the bank so that they can study on it and then they can decide what is the amount approved for giving you credit. So the approved amount is also called as the credit limit. So if you have asked for 1 lakh and they've approved for 70,000, so 70,000 will be the credit limit for your loan. They won't give you beyond that. In practice, bank do not lend 100% of the credit limit, they deduct margin money. Now, even if they have told of 60,000 or 70,000, from that also they will deduct some margin amount or security amount. So, margin requirement is meant to ensure security. They'll deduct that much amount and they'll give you the rest of the loan. Now, forms of bank finance. How can I get bank finance? What are the different ways of getting it? So, one of them is cash credits or overdrafts. Now, both are little bit similar, but then they're different from each other. So, we'll understand that minute difference. Cash credits and overdrafts are when you overdraw your account. So I have 50,000 rupees in my account. I want 1 lakh rupees. I request the bank to allow me to overdraw my account by another 50,000. If the bank allows me and I overdraw it by 50,000, I call it as bank overdraft. That means the bank has increased the limit of withdrawal for me of rupees 1 lakh. I have only 50,000, but I can withdraw up to 1 lakh whenever I need. That is bank overdraft, on which I'll have to pay interest for how many months I have overdrawn. Depending on that, I'll have to pay interest to the bank, and it will be like a short term loan. And once the time period is over, I have to repay back. Now the next one, that is cash credits. Here also you will get certain money in your account, but you will have to pay interest only on the money used. So suppose I have applied for a cash credit of 50,000 rupees and bank has put 50,000 in my account, and out of that 50 I have only withdrawn 20,000 and used it. The rest 30 I have not touched. So I will be charged interest only on that 20,000. So this is the difference between the cash credit and overdraft. In case of cash credit, interest will be charged on the amount used, and in case of overdraft, interest will be charged on the amount that the limit that the bank has sanctioned for us to overdraw. I hope it is clear and I'm audible. One of you can just reply with yes in the chat box. Okay. Thank you, Shreya. Next is loans. Now, next we will understand loans. So, if you don't take cash credit and overdraft, you can go and borrow from the bank in the form of short-term loan. So, you take short-term loans from the bank, and it will be for a period of less than 1 year. After 1 year is over, you can renew it, or you can repay back and take a fresh loan. So that is the, and whatever is the prevailing interest rate of the bank loan, that will be charged. The next is purchasing or discounting of bill. In case of purchasing or discounting of bill, the bank will basically take your bills receivable, something that you have to receive from a particular customer. Or suppose you have a bill of 50,000 that you have to receive from a particular customer after 3 months, but you need that money now. You can go to the banker, give him the bill, the banker will discount that bill and give you money right now. So out of 50,000, the banker may give you 48,000, and 2,000 rupees he will deduct. So whenever he will collect it back from your customer, he will collect full 50,000, but he has given you 48,000. So 2,000 which is remaining is the banker's commission for this particular discounting facility, or you can say from your point of view, it is the interest that you're paying for getting the money early. So So this is another way of taking loan. You give your bills to the banker, he will purchase it or discount it, and he'll give you the money immediately. He will wait for 3 months period or 6 months period, whatever period is mentioned in the bill, and then collect the money from your customer. If your customer fails to pay, then you will be liable to pay it back to the bank. So on that condition only you get that particular money in advance. The next is the letter of credit. Anybody knows what is letter of credit? Can anybody, if somebody knows, can you put it on the chat box or unmute and let me know? Have you heard about letter of credit? What does it mean?
Issued by bank to another bank, like credit.
Okay, issued by bank. Anyone else? Issued by third party as guarantor. Okay. Bank will pay the bill on behalf of us to others. Fine. It is guarantee made. So Apurva, it is correct. It's guarantee. Okay, let me explain what is letter of credit. Letter of credit is an indirect source of finance. You don't get money here, but the banker acts as a guarantor for you to get the goods. It basically is used when you import goods from other countries. When you are buying goods, supposingly from maybe Japan, and the person is sending you goods, he will ask for a guarantor from a bank point of view. He doesn't want a person to be a guarantor, but he wants a banker to be a guarantor. So you can go to your bank and tell him, I am getting so and so goods from Japan and I need a letter of credit. So the bank, if he trusts you and you are a customer who has lots of transactions with the bank, he will issue you a letter of credit saying that if you are unable to pay the money, the bank will pay it on behalf of you. The bank is not actually paying, it is only giving guarantee in the letter to the Japan vendor that if this customer is unable to pay the money at a later date, the bank will pay it instead of him. So we call it as an indirect source of finance. Why indirect? Because bank is not giving money, it is only giving guarantee. And at the later stage, if I fail to pay, then the bank will have to pay it. But even if the bank pays it at a later stage, the bank can recover it from me by selling my assets or by taking it out from my bank account or any other means. So letter of credit is also a way of financing. So that is how it works. So these are certain sources of bank finance as to how bank helps you in getting short term loans. So basically the most popular is loans and discounting of bill. And cash credit and overdrafts are also used, but not that often. Letter of credit is only when you are basically importing, because the other country people won't trust you. They need some institution to be a guarantor for you. So that was about the third one, that is working capital advance by commercial bank. The next is public deposits. Now, what is public deposits? Public deposits are nothing but, as we all deposit in a bank, we can deposit with a company. So the company asks you to give certain money for a certain time period, and if you give it to that particular company, the company call it as a public deposit. So many firms have solicited unsecured deposits from the public in recent years. So you will not get any security for it. You're taking risk and depositing money with that particular company, and they can use it for their working capital requirements. It is mainly to finance their working capital needs. Now, what are the advantages of these public deposits? The advantages to the company are, the procedure of obtaining public deposits is fairly simple. So you, like if you go to the bank and you apply for a particular loan, it takes lots of time. You need lots of permissions. You need to keep asking uh, approval letters. You need to keep submitting a sales plan, production plan. But in case of public deposit, you need to just make a public announcement. People interested will give you the money and in the form of deposit, and you can use it for your working capital. So it is fairly simple. There is no restrictive covenant. Covenant is nothing but agreement or contract. So there is no restrictive contract terms or conditions involved in this. But when you go to the bank will tell you you have to keep your factory building as security or your goods as security. Only then we will give you loan. If you are unable to repay, we'll sell your property. These are all restrictive covenants that banks keep, but the public deposit doesn't has any of such. No security is offered, so it is unsecured deposit. You will not get any guarantee, any security, or taking risk and giving it. And the post tax cost is fairly reasonable, so they don't give you a very huge interest on this. The cost of paying is also very reasonable, so you get high interest compared to the bank, but for the company, paying that much interest is not too costly. Now, what is the advantage of public deposit to the public, like people like you and me, if we are giving it to any company? First is the rate of interest is higher than other alternatives. If you keep it in your SB account, you will hardly earn 5% to 6%. I think Kotak gives 6%. All others are 4 to 5% only. So that's the maximum that you will earn. But if you do a public deposit with a corporate organization, they will pay you at around 8% to 10%, which is much higher than the bank savings for a shorter period. Then the maturity period is fairly short, 1 to 3 years. So they will not take it for a longer duration of 10, 20 years. Usually it will be 1 year, maximum it will go till 3 years. Disadvantages to the company: the quantum of funds that can be raised by way of public deposit is limited. They can't borrow as much as they want. There are restrictions on that also. So the amount that they will get is limited, and the maturity period is very short because they're taking it for a working capital purpose. They cannot take it for years together. They have to repay it within a year or two, or maximum 3 years. To the public, the disadvantages are no security is offered by the company. As I told you, it is an unsecured loan, so there is no security that is offered by the company. And secondly, interest on public deposit is not exempt from taxation. You will have to pay taxes if I get interest from public deposit, because it is a corporate income that I am getting and being a part of it, so I have to pay taxes. So this was about public deposits. I hope it is clear. The next is a very interesting part. It's on intercorporate deposits. Now, what is intercorporate deposits? Intra means within the firm, inter means outside the firm. So, here we're trying to say that one firm is helping the other firm in its working capital requirement. But why do you think, once there's a question, what if the company doesn't pay as it is risky? Okay, Pranali, that is what is the, why they are paying you more interest rate is because you are taking risk. They are not giving you any security. We call it as unsecured deposit, and that's the reason you're getting 10% interest rate, where banks are giving only 4 to 5% on short term deposits. So you're paid more because you're taking risk. And if public trusts the corporate, only then they can invest, or else if you're not ready to take risk, then there is no need to invest in such avenues. So most of them who are ready to take risk only will invest in public deposits. The others who want safe investments, they never go for it. They usually go for bank deposits only. I hope I have answered your question, Pranali. Okay. Now let's go to the next one, that is inter-corporate deposits. As I was telling you, inter means the two different companies. Intra is within your own company. When we say inter, it is two different companies. Now what I'm trying to say here is, company A will help company B in their working capital needs. So company B needs some money, it will call company A and it will say, I need certain amount of money, please give it and I'll use it and return it back. Now why will one company help other company, and what is that other company getting it? Anybody would try to answer? Interest on money, okay, but see, um, commission or interest, fine, but interest they can get at any other place also, right? Why to help any other company? Building trust, okay. Shares, no, they don't get any shares in this case. It is for a short term period. I'm just giving money as a loan, and after some time I will get back my money with interest. So shares are not involved. No ownership company A will get in company B. Okay, so as Vijay, Pooja, Sonam, and Shreya have answered, let's build upon their points. No more regulations. Correct, Preeti? There are no restrictions or regulations. Now, first thing is intercorporate deposit is, Sarvari says, to obtain good market position. Maybe not for market position here, Sarvari. I'll explain you how it actually works. What happens here is one company, that is company A, will give money to company B for working capital purpose. So it is a deposit made by one company with another, normally for a period of up to 6 months. Maximum is 6 months. Beyond that, they won't give. And this is referred to as intercorporate deposit. Now there are three types. One is call deposit. Call deposit is whenever I give you a call, you have to return my money back. In theory, call deposits is withdrawable by the lender on giving a day's notice. So in theory, in books it is said, suppose I tell you, suppose company A gives 5 lakh rupees to company B, and it calls today and says, see, I want my money tomorrow. So that is call deposit. One day notice you give and you get your money the next day. But in practice, in actual, nobody gives one day notice. They wait for at least 3 days, because it's not possible to take money from you now and return it immediately later. So it takes at least 3 days notice. The interest rate on these deposits may be around 10%. Okay, Sonam says call in arrears. Call in arrears is altogether different, Sonam. It comes on share capital. When you're issuing shares and people are paying you money, uh, application money, then allotment money, at that time if somebody doesn't pay, we call it as call in arrears. It has no relation with this intercorporate deposits. Okay, now about call deposits. Basically, within a day, in theory, it says within a day you have to repay if you get a call. But in practice, companies are ready to wait for at least 3 days to get their money back. And the interest charge will be 10% per annum, not 10% for 3 or 4 days. It is per annum. So you have to divide it by 365 days. 10 divided by 365 to get the value of 1 day interest rate. So that comes to somewhere 0.027%. So that much they will be getting. The second is 3 month deposit. These are most popular in practice, and here the interest rate is 12% per annum. So for 3 months, if I do 12 into 3 by 12, it will become 3% for 3 months. And the next is 6 month deposit, which is 15% per annum. For 6 months, it will be 7.5%. So maximum these three ways is where they can give the deposits. A can give it to B. Now, why A will give it to B? First thing is A and B should have a good relationship. Either they should be relatives, or they should be good friends, or they should have some other cordial relation. Otherwise, if both are competitors, A will never help B, because if A will help B, B will move ahead in the business and it will compete with A. So it never happens between competitors, it happens between friends. Second is, these kind of transactions are very confidential. So A will not tell anybody that he has given a certain loan to B, nor B will tell anybody that it has taken loan from A, because the reputation of both the companies will be at stake if this happens. Company B's reputation will be at stake because they'll feel that the company has no funds and therefore it is borrowing from some other company, and company's A reputation will be at stake because they will feel that company A has no other investment opportunity, so it is lending money to other corporate for them to grow and not thinking about their own growth. So these will be secretively done. Okay, so features is there is lack of regulation, as one of you had told me, no more regulations, that is Preeti had told it. There are no restrictions. We are friends, you ask me and I give it to you, so that is the only thing. Secrecy is the second important point. Nobody else gets to know other than A and B that this has happened. So these are all secretive transactions. Third is importance of personal contact. You cannot ask your competitor to give it. Your personal repo and contact with that particular company should be so strong that when you ask for it, they should be ready to give you that particular amount. So these are the features of intercorporate deposits. Anybody having any doubts still here? Okay, so let's move ahead. A few classes at the initial you will have theory. The reason is because the first unit has theory and at the end we have sums. So when we go to sums, we will do it. And if possible, I will try to record the theory in advance and post it so that you can go through, and in these sessions of Google Meet, we can have interaction and doubt clearing and do more of sums. But because it was the first class, I thought let me take up the theory in this class itself. And these things that I'm discussing are new and important. You may not understand it when you read it on your own, so that's the reason also I have taken it up. Okay. The next, short term loans from financial institutions. Now, can anybody tell me the difference between loan from bank and loan from financial institutions? So what's the difference between a bank and a financial institution? Okay, bank is a part of financial institution, correct? Okay. Twinkle is right. Bank is a part of financial institution, but we have already discussed no short-term finance from bank. So now we are discussing from financial institution involves societies, right, Nikhila? Now we are studying something other than bank. So bank is a part of it, but from bank how we get, we saw it gives a Pakshal says it comes in picture when there is need of long-term loans. Okay. So now here what financial institutions we are discussing is, we are discussing about life insurance corporation, general insurance corporation, maybe a mutual fund companies, UTI, and even the companies like cooperative societies, small finance banks like the Jana Bank which has come recently, and there are many more, right? Nowadays you have, if you have heard of Airtel Money, Geo Money, these all these kind of people can also lend. Okay, so they can give either gold loan or they can give short-term loans or they can give long-term loan, education loan, different features for different kind of financial institutions. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. So they are giving you money to run your business. Am I audible? Okay. The reason that they're giving you money is for a short-term purpose so that you can use it for working capital requirement. Okay, so life insurance, general insurance, any mutual fund company or societies, when they give you money, we call it financial institutions. The features are they are totally unsecured and are given on the strength of a demand promissory note. So when they give you these loans, they basically give it on the basis of a promissory note or a bond. So when you go to a society and you ask for a loan, no, they will tell you get a bond, or they will only give you a bond, and they will have a contract between first party, second party giving loan, and how the money comes in. So they are unsecured. It is based on a promissory note, that is nothing but the bond. You need not put any security there. Usually they give you loan on that particular bond. The loan is given for a period of 1 year and can be renewed for 2 consecutive years. So initially when you take, you don't get it for long period. You have to take the loan for 1 year and you can renew it 2 times. So for the second year also you can renew, and for the third year also you can renew. So maximum up to 3 years. And then you have to close the loan. After a loan is repaid, the company will have to wait for at least 6 months before availing for a fresh loan. So once you have taken a working capital loan and repaid it, you have to wait for 6 months to get another loan. You won't get it immediately. So these are certain rules of financial institutions when they give you working capital loan. The loan historically carried an interest rate of 18% per annum. This has been lowered in the wake of falling interest rates. However, there is the rebate of 1% for prompt payment, in which case the effective rate comes down accordingly. So, if you go to a society and you go to a bank, you will find the difference between the interest rate. When you take loan from a society, they will charge you around 16 to 18%. Whereas the same loan, if you take it from the bank, you will be charged somewhere in between 12 to 15%, because these societies and all are giving you loan without keeping any security, only on the basis of a bond. So they need to earn more. So they charge more interest from you. And in case of banks, you keep something as security, so the banker can afford to give you loan at a little lower interest rate as compared to the society. So that was about short-term loans from financial institution. If any doubts, you can post the question in the chat box. Okay, so let's move ahead. Write debentures for working capital. Now this is important. Here what happens is the company issues debentures to get work the money which they can use for working capital purpose. Usually what we had learned, debentures are long term loan bonds. Whenever you borrow money from debenture holders, you borrow it for long term investment or for long term purpose. You invest in a project or you invest in a new business idea and for a longer duration. But if you're using the money for working capital purpose, then you will have to issue rights debentures, in which you get permission from the debenture holders to use certain part of their money for working capital requirement. Okay, so public limited companies can issue rights debentures to their shareholders with the objective of augmenting the long-term resources of the company for working capital requirements. So what they are doing is they are trying to use some portion of their long-term resources for working capital requirement by issuing right debentures. Now there are a few guidelines for which you will have to remember to issue a rights debenture. The amount of debenture issued should not exceed 20% of the gross current assets. Now let's understand this. 20% of the gross current assets, loans and advances minus the long-term funds presently available for financing working capital, or 20% of the paid up share capital, including preference capital and free reserves, whichever is lower of the two. So first condition they are telling is, I'll try to add a new slide and explain you. First condition, 20% of the gross current assets, loans and advances minus the long-term funds presently available for financing working capital. So gross current assets are nothing but only current assets. So gross current assets, maybe I have it as 2 lakh, okay, plus I have loans and advances. These are nothing but the loans and advances given by you to somebody else. So if an employee takes loan from you, you treat it as current asset. If you give advance salary to a particular employee, you treat it as current asset. So loans and advances, which are your assets, we are considering them here. So suppose you have given loans and advances of around 1 lakh rupees. So we have to add these two, which comes to 3 lakh rupees. So this is the first condition. Let's read it again. 20% of the gross current assets, loans and advances minus the long-term funds presently available for financing working capital. So this 3 lakh rupees is nothing but your gross current assets and loans and advances. From this you have to minus, if you are already using some portion of your long-term money for working capital, you have to minus that. So maybe last year from my debentures I used 1 lakh rupees for working capital. So that is the money that I'm already using. So I'll minus that 1 lakh. What I get is 2 lakhs. This is the amount. I will not be able to get full 2 lakh from debentures. I have to take 20% of this. So 2 lakh into 20% I have to do. So 20% of 2 lakh, anybody? That comes to 40,000. Right? 10% is 20,000 and 20% is 40,000. This is the first condition. Or the second condition. What was the second condition? B1 here. 20% of the paid up share capital including preference and reserves, whichever is lower of the two. So that will be the first, or else you have to see 20% of the share capital, preference and reserves. So suppose I have share capital of 5 lakh plus I have reserves of 1 lakh plus I have preference capital of 50,000. So total comes to 6 lakh 50,000. I have to take 20% of this amount. So if I do 6 lakh 50,000 20%, you get it as 1 lakh
1 lakh
30,000.
30,000.
Yes, correct.
30,000.
1 lakh 30,000. So I have to borrow either 40,000 or 1 lakh 30,000 in form of right debentures. So which one to take? Just see this line, which whichever is lower of the two. So I have to calculate both the options and check which option is lower. So from 40,000 and 1 lakh 30,000, 40,000 is lower. So I can borrow only 40,000 rupees in the form of rights debentures. So I can issue 40,000 rupees worth debentures to the public and I can raise money. I hope this is clear. Any doubts? The first condition, you have to calculate both option A and B and select which one is the lower. Is that clear? Okay. The next option, the second condition, the debt equity ratio including the proposed debenture issue should not exceed 1 is to 1. Now what is this? Do you remember the formula for debt equity ratio? It's nothing but debt divided by equity. So debt equity ratio is whatever you have borrowed divided by equity. So let us say, suppose the company already has a loan of 5 lakh divided by equity of 10 lakh, or let's say 6 lakh 50, which we calculated above. So what would be my debt equity ratio if I do 5 lakh divided by 6 lakh 50? It will be 0.76. Correct? Now what they're saying, after you borrow this money, how much are we going to borrow? We are going to borrow this 40,000 rupees. So after I borrow this 40,000, my debt equity ratio should be 1 is to 1. It should not be anything else. Not exactly 1 is to 1, but if they say it should not exceed 1 is to 1. Okay. So that basically means this should not, this answer that I've got no 0.76, it should not be greater than 1. After I borrow this 40,000, my debt equity ratio should not go greater than 1. So let's see. Now I have borrowed another 40,000. So my debt will become 5 lakh 40,000 divided by my equity remains the same 6 lakh 50,000 because I'm not raising additional shares. So now if I do 5 lakh 40 divided by 6 lakh 50, my debt equity ratio has become 0.83. Correct? Is it greater than 1? No, right? So that means I can go for it. So I can raise 40,000 rupees from debentures because after raising that, my debt equity ratio is not exceeding 1. It should not exceed 1 is to 1. Are you all understanding? Because I have no other option than teaching you like this. So I hope it is getting clear. Okay, good. The third condition, let us see. The debentures shall first be offered to the existing Indian resident shareholders of the company on a pro rata basis. So first condition was you have to take A and B both you calculate and take whichever is lower. We calculated 40,000 was lower. So we are going to borrow 40,000 equity ratio, and the debt equity ratio was less than 1, so it did not exceed 1, therefore we go for the second option also. The third condition they're putting is you have to first issue it to Indian residents. You cannot give it to NRIs, you cannot give it to foreign residents. You have to first give it to Indian residents on pro rata basis. What do you mean by pro rata basis? It basically means if you already have a debenture, if you already have one debenture, Okay, it is not going to be for free. I'm not giving it as a bonus to you. You're going to pay me for the debenture, but you will have the first option. I will give you the option. You want to buy or no? So if you have one debenture, I give you an option to buy one more. If you want to buy, you can take it from me, give me money. If you deny and I'm not able to raise 40,000 from Indian residents, then I can go to NRIs and foreign residents and raise my money. So these are the conditions of rights debentures that you need to know. Any doubts still here, anybody? Okay, so let's move ahead. I'll just see how many more. Okay, these things now I have already explained. If you could see the slides, bank finance for working capital, cash credit, overdraft, and then loans, purchasing, discounting of bill, letter of credit. I have already done it. So I won't repeat it again. You can read the slides later. Now the remaining two are commercial papers and factoring. I'll try to complete commercial papers today. Factoring will take little time. We will do it in the next class, or I will send you the recorded sessions for it. Okay, and the rest of the PPT also, I'll try to record it in advance and try and send it to you. So let's see how it works out. Okay, so let's see on commercial papers. Commercial paper represents short-term unsecured promissory notes issued by the firm, which enjoys a fairly high credit rating. So commercial papers are enjoying high credit rating. These are issued by firms. It is not issued by banks. Any company can issue commercial papers. These are short-term unsecured promissory notes. So if you buy it from a company, you call them as commercial papers, and you will not get any security of your money. You are taking risk here also, like you took risk in the public deposits. In case of public deposits, you didn't get any paper or a bond, or like in bank, when you keep money, you get FD certificate, no? So here, when you keep money with the companies, they will give you commercial papers like a certificate, which will say that you have given so and so amount to this company, which will be repaid to you after 90 days or 80 days or 60 days, whatever time period, at an interest of so and so amount. So that will be like a bond which you will have with you. Okay, the features of issuing commercial papers: usually large firms with considerable financial strength are able to issue commercial papers, because new firms will not have so much trust from the public still. So if Tata issues a commercial papers, most of us will buy it and we will give money to Tata. But suppose any foundry here behind GIT issues commercial papers, we may usually not try and trust it, because it's a new company. I don't know anything about it. How can I give loan to it? So usually these papers are given by large firms which are trustworthy, and people usually invest. The maturity period of commercial papers range from 90 days to 360 days. Commercial paper is sold at discount from its face value and redeemed at its face value. Hence, the implicit interest rate is a function of the size of discount and the period of maturity. I'll explain you this. Commercial paper is either directly placed with investors who intend holding it till its maturity. Hence, there is no well-developed secondary market for commercial papers. So, like stock market, there is no commercial paper market. It is directly given to the people who are interested, and those people will hold it till maturity. You cannot sell it again. If I buy commercial paper of Tata for 3 months, I have to keep it for 3 months, and after 3 months, I will get my money back with interest. Okay. Now, the second point I'll explain you. They said commercial papers are basically issued at a discount. Okay, so what does that mean? Now suppose Tata is issuing a commercial paper of rupees 1,000. So this 1,000 is nothing but face value of that commercial paper, that bond's face value. Okay, so when I go to buy this commercial paper, Tata's will take only 900 rupees from me. So I'm buying it for rupees 900. So how much is the face value? 1,000. But I'm buying it for how much? For 900. So what is my discount? 100 rupees discount. So these are usually issued at a discount, but they are repaid at face value. So after, suppose this is for 3 months, 90 days. Okay. After 3 months, what will happen? When I go and give back the paper, I will get how much? I will get full 1,000 rupees. That is the face value. Okay. So what happened now? Just see what is my gain. I bought the paper for how much? Sorry, I got how much after 3 months? I got 1,000 rupees after 3 months, and I had bought it for how much? My investment. I had bought it for 900 rupees. So how much I am gaining? 100 rupees. So this 100 rupees is my interest. Okay, they are not going to give me separately any interest. They usually issue the commercial paper at a discount. When you're buying, you pay less, and after the time period, they will pay you full face value. So for 3 months, keeping money with Tata, I have earned an interest of 100 rupees on each commercial paper. Like this, I may have bought 100 commercial papers. So 100 rupees gain into 100 papers. That comes to almost 10,000 rupees. No, 1 lakh rupees, 10,000, correct. So this is how you will find your interest. So that was the second point. Commercial papers are issued at a discount, is sold at a discount from its face value and redeemed at its face value. When they're selling, they'll take less amount, and when they repay, they will repay the full amount with the face value. So whatever is the difference, 100 rupees, that is the interest rate. It is implicit interest rate. That means it is implied that much will be your interest. They don't mention 10%, 5%, 8%, but they issue it at a discount and they redeem it at face value. The difference between the issue price and the redeem price is the interest rate. Okay, and this discount depends on the size and the maturity period. For 3 months, they may give me 100 rupees interest. For 6 months, they may give me 150 rupees interest because I'm waiting for longer duration. So this difference in amount depends on how much money they are raising and for how much time period they need that particular money and how risky that company is. So I hope till here everything was clear and there are no doubts. If any questions, you are open now for question answer. You can either type it in the chat box or you can unmute and ask any question from any part that we have discussed today. So first class I discussed about the working capital, its meaning, then flexible and conservative policy, what is optimum level, carrying cost, shortage cost with a graph. Second part we started with sources of financing working capital. So if you could see from the list of sources, I have finished till commercial papers. What is remaining is factoring, which I'll do in my next class, or I will record it and send it to you, and next class we can do sums and we can discuss on the recordings. But the condition is you will have to hear the recording and come so that you can ask me questions. It should not be that I send and you just leave it. Okay, so like I took quiz today, like I started asking questions today, next class also, if you don't read the material given and the recordings and come, when I ask questions, if you don't answer, then I may remove you from the meeting only, because I need preparedness from your end also. Only I cannot do it. Okay, any other doubts or questions, please unmute and ask or put it in the chat box. What is the difference between letter of credit and bill of exchange? Okay. Letter of credit is a guarantee letter that is given to you to get money from the company from where you're importing goods. So bank will guarantee that if you are not able to pay, on behalf of you, bank will pay. So it's an indirect source of finance where you are only getting the guarantee. Okay, but in case of purchasing of bill or discounting of bill, you have all, here you have sold the goods to your customer and the customer has given you a bill, which is your bills receivable, which you will receive money after certain time period. So suppose you have a bill of 1 lakh and customer has told you I'll pay you after 1 year or 6 months. You cannot wait for 6 months. So you go to the bank and you exchange the bill with the bank. Bank will give you cash, it will keep the bill and it will receive it from your customer. But bank will not give you full money, it will give you lesser amount. Discounting the bill is what we call it as. So that's the difference. I hope it's clear, Padmanabh. Any other doubts, anybody? Okay. Then if you don't have doubts, any feedback, is it okay if I take classes like this? Actually, we are also arranging for an whiteboard. It will take time. By next week, it should come. If that comes, then instead of typing on PPT, I will be writing on that whiteboard and that will be seen on the screen. Like I write on the board in the class and you all can copy. So like that, if I get that whiteboard, I will solve sums on that and you will be able to see it on the screen. Okay, so whatever best possible, I'll try to do it. Any feedback, anything? Okay, then we'll end the meeting. I request all of you to leave the meeting so that I can end it and then I can get the recording.